now, what's going on in this market where everyone's looking to make a move? And is everyone looking to make a move, or is that perhaps a little bit of bias on who that respondents to those surveys might be? So this is what's going on in the market right now. We've had this study that came out in December from monster.com that said 96% of people are making a move this year. 96% of people want to make a move this year. So let's dive into that data, see what that looks like. We also have some data from Jobvite, or Employee, talking about how 30% of people that got a new job in 2022, this was from the Jobvite 2022 study, saying that they want to make another move, or they did make another move within 30 days, 90 days. 30% of them made a move in 90 days after getting that job. And it listed some of the reasons. We'll look at that. So we're going to go through some of the data. Then we're going to talk about, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what are some of the factors that go into that, and how can our clients manage those, understanding that there's some things on the employer side. Obviously, we work with clients, so let's talk about what clients can do to help themselves maybe not make that many jumps, and how do we help them do that? And then talking about some of the tools that we can use. So say hello, drop me a note in the chat. I know some of you are first time joining us because you joined us last week for the white paper release, and we're glad to see you here again. Story in one of my LinkedIn posts that I'm having some technical difficulties. It didn't tell me which channel. One of your channels is having challenges. So I wrote a little post in a note. It's interesting when we look at that data of 30% of people leaving within 90 days, it's easy to get judgmental, and had to have a little reality check with myself, because my first job out of college, I got to stay where I was working and got kept on as a year in that job. And as that year came to an end, I could only work as a non-student hourly for a year. And then I had to move on, and had some other things happen where I had to hire and train my replacement for that job, even though I loved that job. But as the time was coming near, like I was going to be jobless, I had to find something. I took this job. It was an hour away, and geography is hard. Job in downtown Denver, and no big deal, right? 45 miles, not a big deal, except that when traffic is bad, I kid you not, at least once every other week for the 3 months I was in that job, I sat a mile from the exit that I was supposed to use on the highway for an hour, sometimes even more. Traffic wasn't moving anywhere. You were just stopped. Couldn't go to the exit before, couldn't go to the next exit, just stuck there. And sometimes I'd be an hour late to work because of that. So it was a horrible experience because of the drive, especially for the small town girl. But then it was also because the job wasn't what they said it was. I think it wasn't what they even wanted it to be, just because they hadn't matured yet to where they wanted it to be. And because it just wasn't a good fit. So within 30 days of taking that job, I got another job back on campus at Colorado State, where I had been. And I kind of knew this when I took the job, but the associate professor, the associate dean, had big hopes, right? And he wanted great things. But the reality was that my office was in the closet of the break room. And the department was very small student-wise. I mean, I was used to helping undergraduate and graduate students and being in kind of this bustling place. And all of a sudden, I'm in this office where there's 15 students. And even the accounting, I was in the accounting department, which I didn't think would be a big deal, right? I like numbers. But no, it was like paper pushing the bottom level of accounting. It just was not a good fit. So within, I don't know, it must have been like 6 months or less, I had moved jobs 3 times, because I was able to get a job in student services in the engineering school, which was huge, shortly after I started in that first department back on Colorado State campus. So, I can't judge. I've been there. But how do we help our clients move more intentionally, and perhaps not have to learn every lesson the hard way? I think sometimes we just have to do that. You have to experience it. And there were some things that I could have learned perhaps and done differently. This was before I had gotten my master's in counseling and career development. So I didn't have all those tools, right? And I didn't really have people in my life that had all those tools and didn't even think about going to the career center on my campus, right? That wasn't even in my mind at the time. I knew I wanted to do student work. And so I got that student job and then didn't know enough of what to ask to make sure it would be the right thing. So how do we help our clients navigate that? And what is going on in this space? I'd love to hear your thoughts on why. What do you think is behind some of this movement that people are making so quickly right now? Yay, it's good to see you. And Ben, thank you so much for joining. And Kathleen, excellent. Good to see you all. All right, so let's look at some of this data. And I'll start with the data that is from Jobvite and Employ. So it used to be Jobvite. Now I don't know if they're changing their name or if they've just merged with this Employ company. Haven't dug that deep. But this is the data that says 30% of people left a job within the first 90 days of starting that new job. And that was their data in 2022. This Job Seeker Nation was released in 2022. And they tend to get like 2,000 people, a little bit of a broad scope into who they're talking to. And then their reason, the day-to-day role was not as expected. Yay, that's me, right? Company culture was not expected, incident or bad experience. And that may apply for your clients, but checking in on that. And then unsatisfactory company leadership. Some of these things we may talk to people and see, what does that really mean? And how do you make sure you don't end up in that state? Or, what are we judging that by? And do we have a good judgment of that? And what are we doing to perhaps make that better as we get started and communicate better? Employers can do that too. But again, we're going to talk mostly from the side of the people getting hired. So here's the survey on the right. Not quite sure. Oh, I checked all those boxes. Okay, there we go. Less to look at. So Employ said that 45% of workers were actively looking for a new job. And we can imagine that this might be a little bit low because I think they target people who are new in a company and less of them are going to be starting to look for a new job. But they're not looking internally, which is interesting. So we've got some numbers here, lots of people looking. What are we going to do? And what do you think might be driving their desire to look? I'd love to hear that if you want to drop that in the chat. So this is somewhat contradictory to the message that we've just had put it out recently around what people are expecting from Monster. And they've got a nice, pretty graphic that I'll might pull up and I'll send you the link to. But I was trying to dig deeper because here's Monster's thing. It says 96% said they're looking for a new job. And let me make sure that you've got that. Okay. Yeah. So 96% are looking for a new job. That's what they've got on the top of their thing there that I just highlighted. And part of me wonders, like, well, who did they survey? Because if Monster is surveying people that come to monster.com, they're in a sense saying that 96% of job seekers are job seeking. Who was their survey of? Who did they survey, right? And I can't figure that out. But if they are surveying people going to monster.com, it makes me a little bit just kind of crack a smile here at their data, because in essence, are they saying that 96% of job seekers are job seeking? That's really not that surprising, right? So I'd love to know more about who they researched, who they surveyed, compared that to the Jobvite study of 45% saying they're looking for a new job. My data brain just goes, I wonder. But it's really not that important, right? We know that people are looking. We know part of why they're looking. So if we come to this Monster study, it says they need a higher income, They're unemployed, 40% of people unemployed, which again, of course, those numbers are going to be higher when 40% of the people responding to this survey are unemployed versus the Jobvite, probably 0% were unemployed in the Jobvite study because they are usually going through employers to do their study. Or there's no room for growth in their current role. So those are important things for us to notice. I don't think I get caught up on the 96%. To me, that's a little bit of a nonsensical value. But we can say that they need higher income and there's no room for growth in their current role. So what does that mean to this individual? And how can it inform our work with them if these are the challenges that they're facing? So as I'm pondering those questions, just, what does this make you think? So if people are looking because they need a higher income, because of growth, what types of questions might we ask them? And what does that really mean for our work with them if this is why they're looking? And, I get some ideas and I think, okay, how are we going to help people make these transitions if growth? What does that mean? So I love this. We've been saying about grass is greener. Grass wasn't as green as they hoped. Made the leap for money, perhaps, and the grass wasn't greener. So maybe that shift for money may or may not give you what you're looking for. Expect to enter a perfect world when most companies have had large turnovers. Yeah, I mean, everyone is struggling. It's not like you're going to get into a company where they've got a perfect or the manager isn't also having a life or some kind of existential crisis as well. Recent college grads who lost their job, culture, job satisfaction, feeling purpose driven. So it's a great point. How can we help people with some of these topics, right? What does purpose mean? And how do you find purpose, or what do you do with that? And I know Susan and I released a video just last week talking about purpose, because this is one of those areas where it can get a little confusing. And how do we help clients figure out that for themselves? What does that look like for them? And so those are some of the questions or challenges that we are going to ask and going to dive into with clients as we're going through that process. And so you all are bringing up some of the things that we have been talking about in our classes around this idea of how do you search, right? How do you go through that and figure out what pieces really matter for you? And let me see if I can find my visual. I lost my visual. We have lost visual. Okay, let me see if I close that, if that helps, and I can find what I was looking for. Because there are some ways that we can help people uncover this. And you all know that we talk about the internal piece of it. Obviously, that's an external market-driven piece of it. And this is oftentimes where we want to go first. It's easier to go to the external piece of it. What about companies? What about company culture? What about all of that? But you don't have any sounding board. You don't have any grounding for those questions or that research if you haven't done this work first. So this is the work that we're doing with clients as part of our Certified Personal Branding Strategist program, really helping them understand their interests, their strengths, their values. A lot of us in the career space are doing that kind of work. Then when you get into the branding, it's that differentiators, right? What really makes you different, and how does that connect to the audience's value? Because a differentiator doesn't live in a vacuum. A differentiator is really what makes you unique, and how does that connect to what your audience needs or what they find valuable. Then we've got this purpose piece, and that purpose foundation is really challenging for people. Why am I showing up? And what am I looking for out of this experience? And what I like to think is that we create purpose. We bring the purpose. And you can find purpose in any opportunity if you think of it that way. So what is this job going to help me achieve longer term? Or what is this job adding to my life? And how can I find that purpose? And in our work in this space, we talk about 3 different types of purpose. You have your personal purpose, like your personal growth. How do I want to be and live and grow? Then you have your social purpose. So that's my group, right? My team or my family and friends. It's those small groups that I'm finding in purposeful. And then you've got your societal or kind of more global purpose. How am I contributing to the world on a global space? And McKinsey did some research that sort of walked around on this, and then there's some other research around here, and it just kind of makes sense that we probably won't be able to have all three purpose buckets filled at the same time, because maybe your job's really not great right now, but you really need to focus on your family, so you're not that worried about that. Or maybe you're not able to connect with your direct social group right now for whatever reason, and so you find an opportunity to contribute to the bigger global purpose, like joining a social, a bigger social club. Like Rotary International has always been a place for me to connect with that bigger part of global purpose. And when you let one go for too long, probably if you let any one of those go for too long, probably you get out of balance. But you're probably not going to have all three of those buckets operating at full tilt at the same time, but because we don't have enough most people don't have enough time in their, because things ebb and flow. So if someone's not enjoying their job right now and maybe they feel like they can't leave because of other things that are going on, maybe there's either a personal that they can fill that's unrelated to work, or digging into work to find a way to fill that bucket in a different way, or they can focus on those other buckets. How could they really add some value to a smaller social group or a bigger social purpose, which in the long run may actually also add back to that personal development and growth purpose bucket, but in a little bit different way. Excellent. So let's see here. Higher income, advancement opportunities, jobs would be easy to get when they heard about the Great Resignation, and then it wasn't as easy as they thought it would be, and that's going to continue, right? Some industries are having that talent shortage and others aren't. Do these people make an informed decision? Yes. So this is what we want to do to, as much as we can, help them make the informed decision. And the first part really starts with that self-introspection. And most people think they know those things about themselves, but they don't have as much clarity as they think they do. We can even think about that for ourselves. When you really start thinking about it, or you really have your values tested, or something comes along that's challenging, you've got to go back and get more clarity here. And when we're moving between jobs, we often have external pressures that keep us from staying rooted there, being really clear on that. Like me, right? Left the job in Denver, just was so worried about getting back to Fort Collins and not having to drive that far, that I told myself a story about what that new job was going to be, and didn't look at it as deeply as I probably could have, because I just needed out of that situation. Now that's okay, right? And when we step out of the frying pan into the fire, is that really helpful for us? If I would have waited even one more month and done a little bit more research and clarity work and been able to connect the dots, may not have had to make those short jumps, which are getting less bias against them, but they're just not fun, right? They're not fun for us as individuals to make those short jumps and to be in that space where we're struggling. So it's less about that and more about taking that intentional action. So what are some of the tools that we can help people use to get that internal clarity? Lots of you are using, values assessments or interest tools, just lines of questioning. I mean, a great coaching question session can really help people dive into those. I'll put the link on here, but my post from yesterday had some coaches comment with some really powerful questions, both for a coach to ask a client and then for a client to ask a company. Again, we got to start with that foundation of the coach asking the client, and then we can move into the company research piece. One really simple tool, and a few of the comments on my LinkedIn post kind of circled around this. I used to call it an energy inventory. It sounds very, technical, but it really is just asking people what in their past jobs has given them energy and what in the past jobs has drained their energy. And drained is usually easier for people to start with. What do they not like? And then we need to shift over and really understand what they do like, what they did like, what they're wanting more of. What I find is that, and I'll even have coaches say this to me, oh, I just ask them what they didn't want or what they didn't like, because that's easy. And that's good. It's a great place to start. It gets people talking. But if you're just running away from something, like me, running away from the commute to Denver, you oftentimes will stumble because you don't have a clear idea of what you actually do want. And so you'll run away, but not necessarily end up in the place you want to be. Both sides are important. What is that energy draining? And then what are those things that give you energy? Real quick tool, if you're going through someone's past jobs, to help them identify those areas. Also diving deeper into the positive with appreciative inquiry to really understand what were some of those peak experiences and what made that a peak experience. Why did you love doing that? Who was involved? What were the tasks? What was the environment? Because as you really dive into that, you can learn more about what it is that they found so interesting and engaging about that job. From those, we can pull out strengths. We might use a strengths tool like StrengthsFinder so that you can help people key into those strengths and skills that really give them life, right? Strengths are a life-giving force. It's not just what you're good at, but it's the things that you're good at that also give you life, that bring energy to you. And, people, what do you lose track of time? Those are great questions to help you really dive in and uncover your strengths. And then you might remember that at the bottom of our little light bulb is the goals. And goals are also a part of our brand, although we may not think about it that way, because where you're going makes such a big difference in terms of what you do. Duh, Marie, right? But a lot of people don't really have that goal. Like I said, it's more about what they're getting away from than when they're going towards. And it's really hard to create then. It's really hard to envision and move towards that vision. I tend to do visioning later on in my coaching because I find, especially when people are in crisis, visioning at the very beginning is a struggle. But if we get some of the building blocks first, their values, their skills, their strengths, and then we move into visioning, sometimes that can be easier. Depends on where the client is coming from and how much stress or pressure they're under when that talk of purpose and vision is really helpful and when it might be overwhelming. Susan called it, what'd she call it? Purpose. I can't remember what she called it, but like that you're afraid because you don't have a purpose or you feel, intimidation, right? We're intimidated by this idea of purpose. And so sometimes we don't want to lead with that in our coaching conversations. It can come after some of the building blocks of values, interests, and skills that may be a little bit easier for people to navigate and to articulate. Okay, so when we think about those tools, then that's really where we move into helping people with making those conversations more tangible and just thinking about how we can put those pieces together. So some of you have done our personal branding program. You know that we've got this little workbook where we go through and we have people really think about, how would they describe themselves? How would others describe them? And then how do they kind of define themselves in one word? Then we've got some values tools for you. And if you're joining us tomorrow for the session tomorrow on helping clients find meaningful careers, we're going to give you this values tool in a spreadsheet form so that you can use it with clients. It's something that Susan and I put a lot of time in and kind of going and look at a whole bunch of different values activities and put them together so that people have these ideas of the different parts of goals, intrinsic, content, environment, relationships, and meaning. So we get those and then kind of working through the different areas of values with people. But you can do a lot of this in lines of questioning, just helping people really understand, what is important about their relationships at work, what is important about the work itself, and how do you help people figure out what these things mean to them and then why it's important. And so we go through a lot of those activities here in this section so that people can really get some ideas of what is really driving them. And Susan always says that when you get mad, right, when you get irritated, when you get angry, that's often a value that's being crossed. And for our clients and for us, it's really sitting back and thinking about, okay, so what does that mean to me? and how do I want to do that? So I remember one of the things that just frustrated me in my job in Denver was that you couldn't go, like, you couldn't get up from your desk, you couldn't go to the bathroom unless you made sure that someone else on the team could answer the phone. And that seems like a, normal thing in an office, but man, it drove me nuts. And what it made me realize is my value for independence, right? I don't necessarily want to be bossing anybody else around, but I do not do well when I don't have independence of my work environment and my work choice. Uh, and it took me a little bit of time and some assessments to figure that out and be able to articulate it and to choose work environments that helped me flourish instead of continuing to get stuck at a desk, because a lot of higher education positions, you do both things, right? You advise students, but then you're also serving as the backup receptionist, and those roles just weren't a good fit for me. So these types of values conversations are so powerful for our clients because they can help them not go from the frying pan into the fire. And it doesn't have to be this long, in-depth assessment for people to be able to figure out what do they really need in their next job and how can they articulate it, ask questions that uncover it, and then articulate it once they get the job too, because that conversation is not going to stop just because you get the job. A lot of times you have to renegotiate those working conditions and the job description even after you start. And those are conversations that we can be having with clients too, not just helping them get the job, but in those first 90 days, how are they going to set themselves up for success by communicating well, by setting up those boundaries and expectations in a productive, proactive way so that they can do well at that job, right? So that they can do well and have balance, which they're only going to have if they have the skills to communicate and to set those boundaries. So we have our program coming up, starts tomorrow. We have a program on the meaningful tools. So tools for helping clients find meaningful work. And we'd love to see you there if that's a topic that's of interest to you. And then we also have our personal branding program coming up, where we give you all the tools, all that workbook that you saw, to walk a client through the personal branding program. And this is not about your social media. This is about who you are, what you do, and how you want to communicate that to your target audience, really understanding them and what matters to them. So it's a very in-depth program, just leading you through making those connections. And if you'd like to join us for the shorter session tomorrow, for some reason I can't find the link to that in my too long of list of links, so I'll post that later. It's just a 90-minute session with Susan, giving you 4 tools for helping clients find meaning. So she's going to go through some tools that she's got from the Hudson Coaching Institute, as well as some tools that we've all probably familiar with, like the Wheel of Life. Going to give you some of those resources and walk through how you can use them with clients. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit about resumes, and a lot of stuff about resumes coming out right now in the trends and in the white paper. So next week, we're going to transition into a couple of weeks talking about resumes and LinkedIn profiles and what are some of the trends there. I hope that you've enjoyed the white paper. If you didn't get that yet, you just go to careerthoughtleaders.com/white paper, and you'll be able to get that white paper for 2023. I look forward to seeing you next